start us with our team-by-team previews. These are just things you need to know. Not going to go entirely in depth. We're not going to throw a ton of names at you because you're not going to remember come September, October, because it's the G5, but just what you need to know about this team in case they're on a Tuesday night and you flip it on, you can have a general idea of what to expect. Then we'll give you our conference title game and title winner, along with players to know at the very end. Jake, get us rolling with Colorado State. What can we expect from the Rams in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, this is about, would you say that this is my de facto team? I guess getting into the personal weeds, girlfriend's kind of from the area. She grew up a Rams fan, so I kind of picked this team up as my de facto team a couple of years ago, and I couldn't have picked him up at a worse time because the start of the Jay Norvell era hasn't been ideal. I think it's taking the right steps, but there's a lot of pressure on Jay Norvell to get the Rams going. I think they haven't made a bowl game in about 6 or 7 years. Before that, they were pretty consistent in the bowl games, and they were pretty consistent with not the top of the Mountain West, but, the 6, 7, 8 win seasons. They were giving Wyoming a run for their money, but it really seems like Wyoming's kind of dominated that rivalry, at least for the last half decade. A couple of things to know about this team. I guess win or lose, they're going to be a fun team to watch. I think this is the best passing offense in the Mountain West. I think it was last year. Hawaii might have a run for their money, but at least this team can find the end zone. We'll talk about that with Hawaii here in a minute. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, the true freshman last year, came in and I think was top 3 in passing yards last year in the conference. His issue right now is he's got to limit the turnovers. He was 22 touchdowns of 16 interceptions. I think last year everybody probably watched one Colorado State game last year because I think everybody had their eyes on that Colorado State game. Well, what did he do? He threw a pick 6 to Shiloh Sanders. It was a terrible read. I think he threw 1 or 2 more in that game. Again, got to cut down the turnovers this year. I think he's got a strong upside returning for his sophomore year. This team's got 13 starters coming back, a lot on the offense. The offensive line's got a couple of guys that everybody wants to watch out for. But the name everybody knows, I think, that everybody's pretty familiar with, Torrey Horton. This guy's a leading receiver. He could have went elsewhere. He decides to stay. Good. Yeah, we're going to name a couple of guys who could have done that as well in this conference. He's the first one, man. Biggest thing for them, he needs a Robin. If he's Batman, he needs a Robin this year. Justice Ross Simmons transfers to Syracuse. That was their number 2 option. Another guy transfers within conference to San Diego State. So if they need a number 2 option, otherwise they're just going to double Horton, and Nicolosi's going to have a tough day if that's the case. I think Jay Norvell needs 6 wins to keep his job.
Yep.
You got a little more grace in the G5, but I think right now, Colorado State, if you really pay attention, they've got the money in this conference. I think, Boise's another one, UNLV maybe, but this team's got money to keep players around, and I think the resources are there for Jay Norvell. So you got kind of bad luck last year. You lost on that 50. You guys remember that 55-yard bomb to Hawaii? It was like the last game of the regular season. That's what cut him away from a bowl game. So tough luck last year. You got a good squad back. You got to win 6 games. Got to.
Yeah, and it was known as kind of a dirty team too. Like that Colorado game, everybody got so mad, and I didn't see him that way. I think Colorado made that.
Well,
that one.
Blackburn will be back. That was the guy who put the hit on Hunter last year. That game's on CBS, man, in Fort Collins this year. I'm really excited for it. No Homer aside, I'm really excited for that game. I think it will be a lot of fun, and it'll be good spotlight on this team.
Their schedule is a little tough, though. I mean, I kind of see 3 losses within the first 6 games. Like I see the Colorado, you start at Texas, good luck, Chuck, and then at Oregon State, which is now in the middle of your conference season. So that's not always a tough draw as well. So could be an interesting start. See how they respond. So that was a good preview. Thanks for that one, Jake. All right, moving on to a JP preview. We are going to lead JP's preview off with Air Force. JP is going to take us through the Air Force Falcons. Let's roll it.
The Air Force Falcons in 2024 are going to look a little bit different than what they had. Not necessarily because they're moving away from the triple option. They're going to look different because this is one of the bigger overhauls a program like this has done. Now, when you look at service academies, usually it's rinse and repeat. You're going to have guys in that have been in the program for a while. They're not going to get transfers in. I believe after 1 or 2 years, they have the ability to transfer out of an academy without any military obligations. But we're in a spot where Air Force is in a good Mountain West, and they kind of stumbled after a quarterback injury last year, had a chance to go to Mountain West title, really stumbled down the stretch. I believe they started 7-0. Air Force in 2023 was 9-4, 5-3 in the Mountain West. Current win total sits at 6.5. Now, massive senior overhaul as I was expecting. 5 offensive linemen leave, 3 tight ends, their quarterback as well, and 8 starters on a defense that was at top of the Mountain West a season ago. DBs are going to be the strength on the defense. This side, most of the stuff they lost was up in the front 7. As you expect, they're going to be solid. This isn't a team that's going to have a huge drop off, seeing that their win total is now at 6.5. The rinse and repeat program, as I was talking about a little bit ago, development at the Service Academy is high. They have great coaching. They have a great program and a great culture. It's going to be a tougher year in that they're going to have to get a lot of new guys playing time. Schedule isn't too daunting, right? They get 4 of the bottom 5 teams in the Mountain West to play. So the Falcons are going to have a real shot to get bowl eligible, win 8 games possibly. You're going to have your tough ones per usual in the Mountain West, but it's going to become down to John Boucher, who's going to take the reins at quarterback in this tough triple option. Fullback Dylan Carson, he's going to be the guy on most of the dives in these triple option offenses. Well, a lot of time what you see is guys that are fullbacks are going to be your high-end rushers. They're going to have the most carries. They're going to have the most yards usually. So Dylan Carson, guy to watch there. On the back end, I was saying the DBs are going to be the bright side of the defense. It's going to be a good defense again, I would assume, but it's going to take Jamar Bellamy and Jerome Gilliard. Those 2 are going to be your better defensive backs. So it's tough to say kind of where you see Air Force this year because you're going to have to wait and see. But this isn't a program I plan to see switching below 6 wins. I could see them at 7 or 8 for sure. It's going to be an interesting year. This is a program I was high on the last couple of years. This will be different. So again, big turnover for the Falcons, but I do appreciate you guys letting me jump on. As you can see, this is a little pre-recorded. Thank you for letting me touch on the Air Force Falcons.
All right, there's Air Force for 2024. Obviously, there is a lot to take in there, all within a clip that we don't get to bounce off each other. But I think you hit the gist of it. It's hard to realize that these Air Force academies don't get to use the transfer portal. So
the service academies.
I'm sorry, yeah.
No, you're good.
But yeah, they don't get to use them. And it's so different than the rest of the G5 programs that have guys constantly in and out of there because if they have a good season, they're probably going to play Power 4 ball somewhere. But he gave you – go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to that point, I mean, like their quarterback Boucher goes down last year and the whole season went to crap. So It just shows like the depth is imperative. And like he said, there's not a lot returning this year, but I don't know. You kind of just trust Calhoun in that 17 years of being here. He's going to have guys ready for this, but they literally, besides Boucher, they don't have much coming back at all. But you still expect Air Force to always get 7 wins or be solid, you know?
Right. And especially when you draw a Power 4 team and your Power 4 games at Baylor, like that's a program pretty on the back burner right now. Aranda's kind of fighting for his job. So that could be an interesting one to follow early in the year in week 3. But all right, that is all on Air Force. We're moving down the list. We're going to Reese now to cover a little New Mexico. Reese, tell us about the Lobos in 2024.
Kind of similar to last week when I'm covering these teams. The thing you got to look at too to start off this year for this team, their non-conference isn't exactly an easy start for them. They pull Montana State for their first game, FCS program. That's a good program for those of you who do not know. They lost last year in a blocked PAT in the playoffs to North Dakota State, I believe, who eventually went on to, get to the semifinals. Then they go on the road to Arizona and then on the road to Auburn. Then they open up the season for a conference against Air Force at home, who JP just touched on, is a very solid program year in and year out. And they went 4-8 overall last year, 10th in the conference. They were only 2-6 in conference. And their win total is only set at 2.5. That tells you anything about this team. So they better hope they can get their wins early and often because the over is also plus money.
I was going to say, I was hearing 1.5, like on a
podcast. I went on FanDuel. Shout out FanDuel. Okay. But they had 2.5 at plus 116 was the odds. So if you want to be like Vanderbilt, I think it was you a couple years ago, Schaefer, you were talking about Vanderbilt getting like over 3.5 or whatever, and they got it right away. This team, they're not going to get it right away, but who knows? They could sneak in somewhere because like even their middle of the pack conference games, they're all on the road. They go to Colorado State, San Jose, and then also to Utah State. So like, granted, you're not going to some powerhouse, but like it's still a road game in college football. It's hard to win on. But they also, luckily for them, they avoid Boise State and UNLV as well too. So, and you lose your starting quarterback, you lose 3 other guys to the portal, so you just don't know who's going to be there. And you also have a new head coach too, in Rocco Mendenhall. So we'll see what he's going to be all about. But it's the same idea I had last week too, where it's like if it's a new fan base, you got a new quarterback, and you're going to have a new head coach. There can be some hope, but I just don't know what it's all going to be for this team. You just got to hope you get through these couple weeks healthy and be ready for Air Force to open up the conference. So
2.5 is absolutely shocking as a fan. I mean, I'm sure it's not the world's biggest fan base, but to see that number next to your team must be in shock. But I feel like we need to issue a disclaimer. Like we all said Northwestern was probably going to win less than 2 games in the conference last year.
Yeah. I said take their under at 2.5.
None of us took that money.
Here's the issue. Here's the issue with that. Athlon has the 2 worst teams in this conference at Nevada at 12, New Mexico at 11, and they don't play each other. Mountain West. Yeah. What are we doing? We got to have the 2 worst teams play for that last spot. It's a must. It's just like you got to play the first
like the MAC,
and the
baby.
second team.
Yes, I would agree. I think that would be the toilet bowl in full effect in the Mountain West needs to happen. I would agree there. And speaking of Nevada, that's who I am going to roll into. Let's talk about Nevada a little bit. It's not a good program. It used to be back when the Mountain West was having its day and age. This was like the 07, 09 range. Am I right in that, Jake, saying that Nevada was pretty competitive when they had that big game against Boise State?
Yeah, I was going to say they were pretty competitive back in the day. I think that team won 9 or 10 games.
Yeah, and ever since then, it's just been kind of a downhill roller coaster ride for them. And they're looking to respark it. They got a new coach, and you might have to double check me on my pronunciation here, but I believe it's Jeff Choate, right? It's just Choate.
Yeah, Jeff Coates. I think the H. I don't know. He might be right.
I'm going to just say Choate. If I'm wrong, I apologize to Jeff and Nevada fans everywhere. But that's a former Texas defensive coordinator. He's the assistant defensive coordinator. He's a really good defensive-minded coach, and they need it because I kind of outlined these as 3 keys to have a successful season. If you're Nevada, you only won 2 games last year, so really you're just shooting for 3. Just take a step forward with a new first-year coach. You also bring in former Nebraska co-offensive coordinator and Matt Lubbock. So I got a little ties here to talk about Nebraska, which I always appreciate. But Choate, he has to focus upon this defense. They gave up 27 or more in their first 6 games last year when they started 0-6. And then they won game 7, 6-0. Then they put up a shutout out of absolutely nowhere. So this team is just as lost as it can be. Towards the end of the year, they found their identity and found their 2 wins within the last 6 games, but their first 6 were so embarrassing, giving up 44 and 49, that they have a long road ahead of them. My second main point for them, stop messing with bad QBs at Nevada. You get in Chubba Purdy, transfer quarterback from Nebraska, put him in there. What's the worst thing that can happen? What are you trying to do? I mean, you have the same 2 guys from last year, Brendan Lewis and AJ Bianco. Just put in Chubba Purdy, let him play. If he's healthy, put him in there because you have absolutely nothing to lose, and he gives you a different look with Power 4 experience in 2 different Power 4 conferences. So there's no absolute reason to not use him. Also, I want to give a shout out and hate to Athlon for putting in parentheses Brock's brother when talking about Chubba Purdy. That's such a
respect on his name.
It's not even that, but it's just, come on.
NFL MVP? You kidding me?
No, it's not. I feel bad for Chubba in that instance, honestly. Nobody wants to be known as Brock's brother.
You know what the craziest part was Chubba was higher recruit than Brock was out of high school. I'm pretty sure he was a 4-star and committed to Florida State before transferring to Nebraska. So kind of crazy there.
And he should be able to play at Nevada. So hopefully they put him in there. I have that as one of my keys to this season for them, is put Chubba Purdy in the game. And then 3, you got to just focus on building for next year. Looking at their schedule this year, this is not going to be the year that Nevada makes the gigantic turnaround, gets bowl eligible, maybe wins 7 or 8 games. Like their schedule, they draw SMU. They play at Troy, who's been dominant in the Sun Belt the last couple of years. They get Georgia Southern, who's probably one of the peskier group of 5 teams out there. And they play Minnesota on the road. So it's not the schedule that you're looking for to make that turnaround. So it's going to be a long road ahead for Jeff Choate, but he'll get the job done there, and maybe you'll see some improvements on defense. He brought in good transfers, but that's what I got on Nevada in 2024. I think they're in the right spot in their preseason ranking of the last 2 teams of this conference. It's going to be a rough one.
Yeah.
But hopefully Chubba gets some snaps.
I think he will. I mean, offensively, like you said, you have to give him a shot, and I bet he will. They were probably the worst offensive team in the country last year. I'm pretty sure that Lewis kid threw for 2 touchdowns in a span of like 4 games or something crazy like that.
Their first 6 games were not close. There is no reason. They were like, that's what they said. They said in the end of spring, Brandon Lewis was making better decisions. What does that mean? Not throwing the ball to the other teams? Like, he's just not good. So let Chuba get some snaps.
Going
but
to
I know
class on time.
Yeah, Chuba had some injury issues, and they said he was a full participant at the end of spring, so hopefully he'll take over. That's what I expect as a kid that's seen him play. He can play at that level for sure. But all right, let's move down the line. We're going to the next team. Jake is taking us through Boise State. This is obviously a very important one. Picked to win the conference, picked by a lot of experts to make the college football playoff, and a de facto team for, I think, every 12-year-old in us from those days. So Jake, talk to us about Boise State in 2024.
Yeah, in this case, I don't think we're saving the best for last. Top to bottom roster-wise, this is probably the most talented roster in the G5. Everybody knows about Ashton Jeanty, their star running back, how they kept him out of the portal. Some people regard him as the best running back in all of college football. I think the running back position is as talented as it's been top to bottom all over the country than it's been in the last few years. But GT is definitely top 5, that's for sure. And I'm excited to see what he can do and really get them rolling this year. They picked up a former 5-star in Chris Marshall, former Texas A&M, and I believe Ole Miss. Guys just had some off the field issues. He never really got it going there. He's actually transferring from a JUCO where he came from, those 2 SEC schools. And this is really what they're saying is Boise State is kind of last chance you at this spot. You know, he's actually getting a crack at Division I football one more time. Let's see if he can do it. Who's going to be throwing him the ball? I think it's Malachi Nelson, the former 5-star again, coming over from USC. It's not guaranteed he's going to take the spot. And some people think that they'll give the guy who took over a little bit last year, was the backup, might start the season out that way. But I think Nelson will start, I wouldn't be surprised 2 or 3 games in. On defense, they have the best pass rusher in the conference. And I want to say this right. Ahmed Hassanin. I think he had over 12.5 sacks last year.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it'll roll with that. You got to sound like you know what you're doing. The biggest thing with them, like I said, the talent's there. Can they just be more consistent under Danielson, their first-year head coach? Andy Avalos, that's basically what got him fired last year, 10 games in. I think it was last year that they had that terrible loss to UTEP. Maybe I'm even thinking 2 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. And that's UTEP was a bad football team last year, and you just can't. You can't have those kind of games. Taylon Green was playing inconsistent, and everybody's raving about how he killed the spring at Arkansas. So might have been an Avalos problem. We'll have to wait and see. I think everybody likes playing for Danielson, so it'll be a fresh start for them. Some of the games, though, I mean, if this is going to be the team that's going to get that G5 spot in the playoff, they're going to have to earn it. I think if they go 11-1, this team should automatically get in. I was going to say, depending on who they lose to, but 11-1, no matter what, will get them in. I think everybody knows who they're probably going to lose to if we go through the schedule. On my left there, at Oregon to start the year. They really have to come out and show better than what they did last year when they went on the road at Washington.
Yep.
Washington was really good. Obviously, we all found that out. I don't think we realized how good Washington was at the time, though. So I think I've said this before. If Oregon goes out in there and wins by 35, maybe that's a team that's going to make the national championship again. They play at UNLV. They have Washington State and Oregon State at home. I want to go backtrack because the UTEP game was 2 years ago. That was when Hank Bachmeier was around. Last year, they had the bad loss at Memphis, and then they also lost by 2 to UCF at home in a game that they could have won as well. So it's been a thing now. Inconsistently starting off the year. You got to start off well, and you get Georgia Southern first week on the road, and don't be looking ahead to Oregon. Go take care of business right away. You're going to be favored in that football game. So that's what I got to see from this team.
Yeah, Georgia Southern is a tough one. I think the first 2 weeks, it's imperative for them to win week 1, because if they start 0-2, God knows where that season could go. But I think this team has all the hype for a reason. Like Ashton Jeanty is like a serious contender to be in New York at the end of the year. The guy is a legit player and it's another guy that could have played in the Power Four if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
There's no doubt in my mind that he was getting offers to play elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying like before. I think Colorado State, Boise State, I mean, maybe like UNLV, these are teams that can somewhat compete NIL wise to at least keep the players around and prove, GT could have been like Quinshon Judkins and go to Ohio State and be the second back, maybe like a 1B option. But hey, man, you have an opportunity to probably rush for like 1,500 yards this year and maybe win a conference, maybe get into that playoff spot. So,
yeah, I think everybody would like to see Boise State back in the college football playoff, especially that youth in us that saw them in that spotlight back then. Yeah. So that was a great breakdown there. Big Boise State fan base has found our page the last couple of days. So if you're in here and you're a Boise State fan, drop a comment. We have a little bit of Boise State homerism going around this show for sure. But all right, we are moving on to the next team. We are going back to a JP clip. He is going to talk about the Wyoming Cowboys in 2024. JP, take it away.
Just like mid-Tennessee State, Wyoming's going to have a big reset with the coach that they've had there for a while. They're going to step a different direction. Now, this identity change is going to happen the same. It is at middle. But Craig Bull steps down. Jay Saville steps in, and he is going to make this a little more of a balanced attack, find a way to not just be so run heavy, really play crazy field position football. That's kind of been Wyoming's identity for the last 10 years. They still want to run the football. They're still going to have that be the focus of the team, and they have no reason to step away from it with a guy like Harrison Whaley, who's probably going to be all Mountain West right beside Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. It's a very, very veteran team. They just don't have the star power at other skill positions. Like Harrison Whaley is going to have to cover a lot of the workload, but Evan Svoboda is going to have to step in after Peasley leaves. He's a little better thrower than Peasley was, not quite the runner. But if you can get a way to stretch the field a little more with this offense, I think there's big chances that you can make Wyoming a better team and a better program down the road. 6 offensive return and 7 defensive starters. Now the defense is going to be solid once again. We're going to have to see how good it is compared to a year ago. That'll be something that to pay attention to, but I don't expect this team to change too much in their identity and what they do. Maybe a little more 50-50, maybe 60-40 to the throw, but the big plays are going to come through Harrison Whaley in the backfield. Can you get the chuck plays that I was talking about? If Svoboda is the guy and he really turns out to be just a top end guy, super accurate, they're not going to ask you to be a world beater at Wyoming, but if you can deliver 65-70% completion percentage, don't turn the ball over, that's everything and more for a program like this. A team that you usually see around the top of the Mountain West, a win total at 6.5. Currently, they went 9-4 a season ago, 6.5, and they're going to get, they're going to play Boise State. They're going to play Colorado State. They're going to have to win some bigger games to have a shot to get into the Mountain West title. Maybe that's a year or two away, but I think with this transition, it is something to really pay attention to. So Wyoming will be a ton of fun to watch. New coach, same identity, maybe a little more opportunities to grab chunk plays and be a little more explosive, but this is still a team that's going to play good defense and have elite running backs in the backfield. So that's the Wyoming Cowboys for 2024.
All right, there it is on Wyoming in 2024. Obviously, a lot of information there, but Wyoming's another one that has a bigger fan base for a group of 5 school. JP got to visit there last summer, so it was only fitting that he got to preview them for the upcoming year. Anybody else have anything on Wyoming other than, I know our uniform video has been blowing up on YouTube, rebrand coming, but what do you think of Jay's first year out there? Do you think Wyoming's going to have a good season?
Yeah, I think they're trying to implement what Craig Bull handed to Jay Saville. Like, I really do think that. And JP said his name 100 times, but I think it's appropriate because the Whaley kid, you're going to have to give him the ball. I think he rushed for 950 yards last year. He's going to get to that 1,000-yard mark if he stays injury-free. I think he's got that capability. You're not going to change in identity with Wyoming. I think it's going to look like every Wyoming team we see. I did hear Evan Svoboda, their quarterback, like Josh Allen comps, because he's 6'4", I think, I'm going to look right here. 6'4", 245. Massive kid.
Big boy.
The Peasley kid last year, he was sneaky. He was like a shorter kid, but he was quick on his feet. I'm interested to watch this Svoboda kid and see, and like, he's not going to be Josh Allen, and I'm guaranteeing he's slower than Josh Allen, But if he plays up to his size, yeah, I think this team could get to the win total of 6.5. Play BYU at home, by the way.
Yes, with the bottom half of this conference too, you got to be able to put up some numbers against some of these teams that they drew. So Wyoming will be a fun one to follow. But all right, moving down the list, let's go back to Reese. Reese is going to talk to us another team in the top half. We're going to talk through the San Jose State Spartans. Reese, take us through them.
Well, everybody remembers them last year as a very fun team. Opened up the year at USC, had a hell of a quarterback. But this year, unfortunately, lost a lot of those guys. Win total right now is set at 4.5. You can take the over at -115. Similar to the team I talked about before, they open up with conference at Air Force. But fortunately, their only other tough road game in conference is going to be at Fresno State. They catch UNLV, Boise State, and Wyoming all at home. And they also end the season with 3 games all at home, too. So who knows? Like, they could break that 4.5 easy. You get those games at home, catch teams on the back half. You get guys out as long as they can stay healthy. And looking at who their starter is going to be week 1, you had to replace Cordero, I believe was his name, from last season, who accounted for over 2,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. So those are big shoes to step into. They got a guy by the name of Jay Butterfield, previous Oregon commit, who's going to be stepping into those. And they also got to replace their top 2 running backs from last season, who accounted for 85% of their rushing yards and also 27 of their rushing touchdowns too. That's pretty much all of your offense you got to replace right there. So if they can find a way to do that with their new head coach, Ken Niumatalolo.
There you go. I was wondering if we were going to get it.
On that. Shout out whoever put the mnemonics in there, or however the hell whatever that word is.
The pronunciation?
Well, yeah, but like, when you like, whatever. But he's got to replace the shoes of their old head coach, Brent Brennan, who they haven't had a head coach there with a winning percentage over 50% since 1991, if anybody out there is keeping track of that at all. But Brent Brennan was a Mountain West Coach of the Year in 2020 when that whole COVID thing happened. So I think in recent memory, people can remember San Jose State is a pretty competitive team. So this year's going to be a little tougher sledding for them because of how much offense they have to replace. But if you can get a quarterback in there who can take care of the ball, you can get guys in there to take care of the ball and just be able to play a little bit of defense. If your offense is going to score points, they can be just fine, but we'll see what the new head coach and quarterback can do this season.
I can't believe nobody chirped me before we let Reese go on that tangent, but I definitely said a team that's picked towards the top half of this conference just off my sole memory of, like, this is a team that won 6 games in the Mountain West last year, and I feel like it's a team that always has that gritty middle of the season run where they rattle off like 4 or 5 in a row. So that win total seems extremely low to me, but I get it. First-year head coach, but what the hell am I thinking?
Well, Brent Brennan did such an underrated job. Like, he made San Jose State a competitive team in this conference and in like college football in general. Reese, you said it. Nobody had a winning percentage above 500 before he steps in. Niumatalolo didn't end great at Navy. I think had 3 straight losing seasons before he got fired. I think it's got to be a disclaimer, even though it's been said, no, he's not running the triple option at San Jose State. I think it's Craig Sturtzman's the new offensive coordinator. He's calling it like the spread and shoot or something like that. I need to read over that again. He said they're calling, here we go. The spread and shred. That's what he's calling their new offense.
Sounds better.
Oh, the receivers that's like the one group that's coming back for this offense. So yeah, the Butterfield kid better be ready to throw it 45 times a game. So it's going to be a completely revamped team.
It absolutely is. But all right, Reese, thank you for that on San Jose State. Moving down the list, it's back to me. We are going to talk a little bit on Fresno State now, a team that is actually picked towards the top of this conference, and rightfully so. It's a team that I refer to in my mind as one of the grittier universities out there. It's always a team that's dogfighting with Power 4 teams at the beginning of the year, maybe beating them, and then competing in games late in the year that they probably shouldn't as well. I mean, you take a look at last year, they rattle off a win at Purdue to open the season. Then they go to Arizona State and blank the Sun Devils 29-0. That's just kind of the team they are, man. And my 3 keys this year for Jeff Tedford, who they're kind of talking about maybe retiring here soon, so you could have a different conversation next year. But you're coming off a 9-4 year, and a lot of it's on the back of Mikey Keene. Mikey Keene, who we're going to go into depth of his statistics last year. You get him back, which is huge. It's what this team needed, but you got to keep him healthy because you do have a couple of dogfights toward the beginning of this year's schedule. As long as he stays healthy, you should be competitive. Looking at Keene, he is a former UCF quarterback. He transfers into Fresno State, and he throws for 24 touchdowns and almost 3,000 yards last year. He had almost a 70% completion rate. He finished with 67%, I believe. He's got to stay healthy. He's like what he puts his team on his back, man. I mean, this is a really, really good quarterback at a school who's got a chance to make some noise with some teams that are competing for a college football playoff bid. So Fresno State's definitely somebody to watch alone for that reason. Second point, dude, you gave up 30 points a game last year 6 times. That's kind of why you were the way you were last year. Your 4 games that you lost, a lot of the time was on the back of your defense. You always got the points in your favor, but if you give up 30, it's tough to compete in any league, especially in the Mountain West. We brought in 2 USC transfers on the defensive side of the ball that should make an impact and help there, but that's going to be imperative to the success of their season. And then the last point, you open at Michigan. You have a chance to make some noise. I mean, I'm not saying go into the big house and beating the defending national champion, but competing will do a lot for this team. I think being yourself after you go to the big house and most likely get beat, you're probably going to be a 2 or 3 score underdog, no matter who's playing quarterback. If it's Alex Orji or somebody else for the Wolverines, you're probably going to get beat. But as long as you're competitive in that game, it could do a lot for your season. So I think to just be yourself and be the program that Fresno State is after that will be imperative to their long-term success. And I do think they'll find that later in the year anyway. But that's what I have on Fresno State. It's going to be a fun team to watch and a team that nobody really wants to run into. This is a team that I wouldn't want Nebraska scheduling, and I'm sure Jake wouldn't want Iowa State scheduling. Like, it's just a gritty G5 team that finds ways to win and honestly dominates sometimes.
Yeah, and they last year, going back, they won 9 games, that's a pretty good year. I don't think anybody's going to complain about 9 wins, especially at Fresno State, but back-to-back losses at home and then on the road to New Mexico and San Diego State. You can't lose to those 2 teams, and you're 11-2. And who are you playing in? You're probably playing in a much better bowl game. Maybe you're fighting Liberty for that game against Oregon, in the Fiesta Bowl. So, and then they lost to Wyoming by 5. They got beat by San Jose State pretty handily. Again, that'll happen. We just kind of talked about it, but yeah, they win some of those games that they were supposed to last year. And it's a completely different narrative to, I think, going into this season. I think if they get to 10 wins, we're talking like it's 1A, 1B with them and Boise. But right now, I feel like everybody's putting Boise ahead because of that.
And I know they had some defensive injuries last year that kind of didn't help them, but they still weren't giving up enough points to not beat those teams later in the year. Like, how do you lose to New Mexico and then go on the road back to New Mexico for the New Mexico Bowl? Mikey Keene's the offensive player of the game, the MVP, and you beat him by 27. Like, they fell apart for no reason and kind of shot themselves in the foot. All right. That's all I have on Fresno State. Moving back up the list, we are going to talk about one of the new additions, not fully an addition to the conference, but playing the conference schedule, and that is the Oregon State Beavers, coming from the now non-existent Pac-12. Jake, talk us through the first year, quote-unquote, Mountain West Conference member in Oregon State.
I'm really interested, too, when this picks up. Are we going to get some flack from Oregon State and Washington State fans just like, hey, we are not in the Mountain West. We're not in the conference title. Well, I hate to tell you, man, that's what your schedule is. We're going to throw you in on this episode. That's how we do things. But with Oregon State, this is not close. We lose DJ Uiagalelei over to Florida State. Jonathan Smith takes the job at Michigan State. You don't have a conference, and Damian Martinez leaves post-spring to go to Miami when he said he was going to stay in December. So kind of some darker days if you're a Beaver fan right now, but it's going to be interesting, man. I don't think they're going to be head and shoulders better than all of these Mountain West teams. So, we'll have to see if they can stay relevant. You lose your star running back. You lose 25 guys more to the portal. Again, you lose your starting quarterback. Who's going to replace some shoes, especially for Martinez? You bring in Ole Miss running back Jam Griffin. That hopefully stops a little bit of the bleeding when it comes to Martinez. Who's going to replace DJU? Who's going to be your quarterback in 2024? It's either down to former 4-star Jabari Johnson from Missouri, who obviously left after Brady Cook And Garcia kind of took his spot. He was more like the third string guy, maybe even the fourth string in Missouri. Or it's Giovanni McCoy. If you guys remember this guy, he had a little bit of highlights in the FCS playoffs at Idaho. Good player. I really like this kid. I think this guy would be my QB1 if I had to pencil it in right now, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe Johnson just needed to kind of a change of scenery to kind of revitalize his career. Defense is going to be their strength. I think it was last year besides the run game, but defense is going to be their strength again this year. Both defensive ends are back. The secondary is going to be solid. They brought in a kid named Kobe Singleton. He started every game for Liberty. So he's taken a little bit of a step up, but I think that's a guy that you got that's really going to turn some heads. And I think the defense is going to be, I'm not saying better than last year, but it's going to be similar. It's just a matter of, I mean, what are we going to get out of the offense this year? And they bring in Trent Bray. He was on the coaching staff last year to kind of hold that camaraderie together for those who did stay. So I think you're going to have to just take your lumps in year one if you are an Oregon State fan and just go back to the drawing table next year and talk about it again. So,
and they do have some Power 4 opponents out there. They play Oregon. That's a protected one, so they will play that again. They'll play the Civil War. Then they got Purdue on there as well, who's a down program, but still that gritty. We'll see if Ryan Walter's squad can step it up at Cal. And then they round out the year. Honestly, probably I would say their toughest game because they get Oregon and Purdue at home. I'm saying at Boise State's going to be your toughest game of the year, and that's their last game. So that should be an interesting one to follow. So Oregon State, you're getting wrapped in the Mountain West if you're playing that schedule, and that's what we got on them for 2024. Moving on, we are going back to Reese. Reese, you are taking us through the Utah State Aggies. Tell us about them. It's on mute, but we'll let it give a little buffer.
Preferably with your mic on off. Mute.
Sorry, the dog's already.
Whatever. No, he's protecting your ears, people. All right, Reese, tell us about him.
How can we talk about this team and not talk about our buddy JP's favorite quarterback, who is now going to be at this team?
Yes,
Spencer Petras feeling it down the sideline, out of bounds. But he's slated to be the starter as of right now with new head coach Blake Anderson. We'll see if he's got something dialed up to unlock this guy's full potential. But if I was a gambler, man, I think they're going to kind of rely on the run game. They're bringing back their two top rushers from last season. Rasul Faison, who rushed for over 700 yards with 5 touchdowns, and Robert Briggs, who rushed over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then schedule-wise, they're at USC, and then they get Utah at home. So they're going to challenge themselves with a non-conference. So just stay healthy through those. I think you're going to learn some stuff about some guys and what their offensive scheme is kind of going to be like. And then when it comes to conference, you go on the road to Boise State, you go on the road to Wyoming, and then you also get UNLV at home. And the big thing, too, is you have UNLV and Boise State back-to-back weeks. So you got to find a way to win at least one of those games if you're this team. Win total set at 5.5. You can get the over at for minus money. So
easy. How about
you got to at least get that?
How about that? Let's go 4 out of 5 weeks. We got at USC. We got Utah at home. We have at Temple. Okay, but we still have to fly across the country. And then we have at Boise State and then UNLV at home.
Yep.
And
you better hope that offense is figured out, Spencer.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're taking the over at 5.5 for minus odds.
Spencer Petras has the chance to do the funniest thing ever. Like, what if he just goes and throws for like 4,500 yards?
Also, keep in mind his backup quarterback, Bryson Barnes. We remember the name. He was the guy who stepped in for Cam Rising last year. So maybe we get Bryson Barnes versus old team by week 3. They had enough of Petras. They're like, we're good on the Petras train. We're gonna change to the pig farmer. Is that it? He was the pig farmer, right?
Yes. Yeah. I am honestly shocked that Bryson Barnes is listed behind Spencer Petras. So we'll see if that even happens. Like if Bryson Barnes ran out week 1, I wouldn't be shocked. And I don't think JP would either. Right? Like it would be hilarious for Petras to go throw for 4,545 scores at Utah State, but that was a good one. Thank you, Reese. Let's go back to JP, who I seem to skip, but we do have one more JP preview. He is going to take us through the San Diego State Aztecs. Roll the clip.
The San Diego State Aztecs have to be one of the more intriguing teams in the Mountain West now, especially with the hire of Sean Lewis. If you remember, Sean Lewis was the head guy at Kent State for a really long time, had that program at highs, and then he joined Deion Sanders at Colorado. They ran a really high-flying offense for most of the year. I think a little dispute within the coaches kind of ended up making him move on. He takes the head coaching gig at Mountain West. Used to be a bigger powerhouse in the 2010s, but it's a program that is ready for some change and a new identity. So Sean Lewis comes over from a team that lived on the run. If you remember all the years ahead with Rashad Penny, they are going to have the ability to reset this roster, reset this program, brand new stadium, brand new identity with a high-flying Sean Lewis offense. Biggest part here is they're not sure who's going to play quarterback quite yet, but my guess it's going to be the Florida State transfer, A.J. Duffy, dual threat quarterback, has the ability to make plays with his legs as well as with his arms, which is key in a Sean Lewis offense. The defense switches schemes as well. They're going to go to a 4-2-5. They're going to have to really build that front four to be dynamic and to handle teams like a Boise State, like an Air Force, even Colorado State at times. You're going to have to find a way to really compete and be physical up front. It'll take a little bit. I think with this team, they were 4-8 a season ago, with win total 5.5 now. It's going to take 2 or 3 years for Sean Lewis to really get his foot stamped on this program and make it move forward, but he's going to be able to use the transfer portal to his advantage. I can see this being a destination for a lot of guys, from Power 4 fallbacks to guys at lower schools that are going to jump up and really make an impact for an Aztecs team that is very excited about the future and that the hire that they made. So how are you going to make things happen within the Mountain West with Sean Lewis? It's got to be the offense. It's what he does. It's his bread and butter. He's very good at it. A couple guys that you need to know, Keenan Kristen and Jalen Armstead are going to be 2 running backs. They're both returning from a season ago. Now they go into a better offense, probably schemed a little bit more for them to be big play guys rather than just workhorses that get a certain amount of carries and low yardage. Deshaun Polk, he's a West Virginia and Kent transfer. So he was with Sean Lewis. He's been in the system before. I think he'll be their leading receiver going into this year, and he's going to be someone you need to pay attention to within the conference. Again, defense is the question mark. We're really not sure how that's going to go, but the guys on the defense are 2 transfers at linebacker. They're kind of solidified that 4-2-5 in the middle of it. Owen Chambliss and Tenno Latui are 2 guys that you really need to pay attention to, a Utah and an Army transfer. This is going to be an interesting year for San Diego State. I think in 2-3 years, we're really going to be looking at this team sitting, top 4 in the Mountain West, really with a chance to fight for a 12-team playoff spot. So San Diego State here, I know you guys maybe aren't as seasoned on it, you listeners, but trying to help you understand what Sean Lewis can do to a program this good in California. So that is the San Diego State Aztecs.
The hottest stadium in our Group of 5 football, I would assume, in San Diego State. But I do think it could be a turnaround there. Sean Lewis' offensive schemes are super good. You probably remember him from Colorado last year. Think of how high-flying that offense was. So he definitely has some potential with that recruiting area to make a spark in San Diego State in the program they're trying to revamp and re-up. So that was good from JP. Shout out to him for making those clips, but that wraps up his teams to preview. I don't think he put in the doc for his conference championship game or conference champion, but he's a little bit of a Boise State homer. So if he's in the comments, he can probably drop him in, but I would assume that Boise State, he's got him on top of the Mountain West.
Oh, he did put him in now.
Oh, he did. Okay, perfect.
It.
All right, beautiful. You can throw those at me when it's time for that. But I'm going to move on to the UNLV Rebels. This is going to be a fun one because this is a program that I think has potential to be very good. Like, they've got the money, they've got the hot spot to recruit kids to. So I think they'll be a long-standing, decent Mountain West team if they can uphold what Barry Odom kind of started last year. So it's in his second year. They went 9-5 last year, competed, man. But my first key for them, for their 3 keys to have a successful season, you got to replace the quarterback. And they brought in a couple of good transfers, which we'll talk about, but Jaden Mavia made up a good chunk of their offense production last year. He transfers to USC, so you got to look for people to replace him, and they went out and got a couple of good FCS players. They went out and got, I'm going to go for it, Haj Malik Williams, I believe, from Campbell. Really, really good quarterback. And then a guy that Nebraska was actually after, and I had a buddy who even told me about him when I didn't know he existed, Matthew Sulka from Holy Cross. He was Patriot League Player of the Year. He's also back there. I actually think I think he could start. He's probably a more experienced player. He put up absolute video game stats in that conference last year. So they went out and got the pieces that could get them there. And I think that's why they're still looming around the top of this conference. My second key, I think everybody expects me to say his name, but Ricky White the third. This is probably the best player in this entire conference next to Ashton Jeanty, and it's not really close. This guy definitely had some power forward looks. I'm sure he had texts flying that are not supposed to be happening, but it's a guy I was honestly shocked that didn't leave the program. He's pretty good, man. You have to put emphasis on getting him the ball, no matter who you put at quarterback. So get Ricky White in the mix, and I think they'll have some success again in this conference. And they're picked towards the top for a reason, and they bring in talent on the offensive side. You return 7 starters on defense, and you bring in 2 power forward transfers in the secondary, 1 safety and 1 cornerback, both transferred in from Arkansas, who kind of had a max exodus.
I'll say Jalen Catalon is an awesome pickup from Arkansas, from Texas. Didn't play last year due to injury, but he was awesome at Arkansas. Like, that doesn't get talked about enough.
Right. And that's what they needed, because their last 3 games last year, they end with 3 losses. And in those 3 losses, they give up 37, 44, and 47. And a lot of it was through the air. So they needed that revamped secondary. It looks on paper like they got the pieces they needed to continue to be at the top of the Mountain West. And I think that they're going to do so. I think they're going to have a good year, and UNLV is kind of here to stay around, especially in the NIL era. So that's what I have on UNLV. All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
I was going to say, with the quarterback competition, it's going to be pretty easy when you have Ricky White to throw the ball to.
Yep. Just drop back, throw it in his direction. He'll catch it.
They also catch my orange at home just at Heads Up this year, by the way.
You said that he is he could have went Power 4. He is actually a Michigan State transfer from a couple of years ago. I didn't know that until a couple days ago. Yeah, he's a Michigan State transfer.
I didn't know he went there, but that's crazy that he stayed in power Group of 5 bowl, because he could have definitely gone to the Power 4. And Reese, put some respect on UNLV's name. Syracuse brings in UNLV. UNLV doesn't visit Syracuse. I mean, that's a big time.
That's gonna be a nice trip for the boys from up north to go down to Las Vegas for a week, though, just to play some football. I won't lie about that.
That is a long trip. We're going to see so much of that in college football. It's actually insane. But all right, moving down the list, we are going back up to Jake, and he is going to take us through Washington State. Tell us about Wazoo and what we can expect for them in 2024.
Yeah, it starts with familiar faces. When you keep your head coach around, I think it helps you during all of this transition from being outside of the Pac-12 and all of that. Jake Dickey's back for his 3rd year. The offensive line brings back 4 starters, but this was a group that gave up 31 sacks last year. So it's kind of like the old beaten drum of bad returning production. You know, it's a group that hopefully can take another step. I think the camaraderie and just learning the scheme of Dickey for his 3rd year will help out that group on top of being in a Mountain West schedule. But we have to see. It's like, who are they going to protect? Not sure. It's kind of a quarterback battle at this point. They have the backup from last year, and I think another FCS transfer. Either way, we got to be honest with ourselves. It's going to be a downgrade from losing Cam Ward. You knew that you weren't really going to keep him around. You didn't have the budget for him. He goes off to what we thought was the NFL. Now he's at Miami and is probably a top 5 quarterback in all of college football. Along with the quarterback questions, who are you throwing the ball to? You get your leading receiver back in Kyle Williams, but you have 4 new transfers at the receiver spot. If you're going 4 wide, 5 wide, kind of like that Dickey likes to do, they got to replace some guys. So let's hope these transfers, at least a couple of them, pan out. You know, you have Williams, but we'll have to wait and see. Ron Stone Jr. on the defensive side, they lose a great edge rusher that he was. How can the D-line improve or fill some of those spots? It's a lot of questions. I think that the only thing that this team has over Oregon State might just be the coaching staff, and that it stayed around after the transition, but that's really it. I think Oregon State's got much more talent than Washington State does. Schedule-wise, you go at Boise, you go at Fresno, you have Washington, and I believe a neutral site game at Lilly Field.
Yep.
And then you have Texas Tech going there. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'm guessing Texas Tech is not going to sleepwalk their way into that football game like they did in Wyoming last year. So unfortunately, Wazoo, you're going to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, Texas Tech is another team that I don't know, man. They just something about them. They just interest me in that new Big 12. So we'll get into Texas Tech during the Big 12 preview, but that is an absolute dogfight that will be. All right, we got one team left before we give you our conference title predictions and picks. Reese is taking us through Hawaii. Take us through the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors to round out Mountain West.
So the one thing that you got to know about this team, their quarterback Braden Shager. Last season caught my eye. Last season, I think we all remember that Vanderbilt game that opened the year at Vanderbilt when they had half the stadium that was being worked on, but they had to shit it out there. Basically, head coach Timmy Chang just gave him kind of the keys of the kingdom last year, and he's back again this season. Second team, preseason all conference. The problem is he's got to be able to not turn the ball over. They were -10 last year for a turnover ratio. But he threw 26 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, threw over 3,500 yards. So I think he's going to give him kind of the keys again to the kingdom to see what he can do. The problem is that offensive line was atrocious. They gave up 39 sacks last year, and they only averaged 75 rushing yards per game last year with 6 touchdowns total on the year. So what are they going to be able to protect him better? Because he's a hell of a quarterback. But if you're running for your life out there, you're going to be making some inadvertent throws into some double coverages or just not getting proper reads off. So he's going to be a big key for this team this year. And then when you dive into their schedule, when they went to their non-conference, they didn't really go the easiest route. I mean, they scheduled the Delaware State, UNI, who shout out the boys from Cedar Falls. You had to go play in Hawaii this year for a
Two
football
FCS,
game. Good for you guys.
scheduled on your schedule. It's just
to start off,
crazy.
yeah. And then they get UCLA at home as well. And then Sam Houston State, who I touched on last week, who they were down last year, but history may shade that they have a pretty good head coach. They may have a bounce back this year, and they'll be tougher than expected. So they're not exactly penning wins you can write down. You might pencil them in to see if they can do them. But we'll see what this team's going to be about, because if they're going to turn the ball over like they did last year and defense cannot get stops or stop a running nose, it's going to be an uphill battle for these guys. One bonus from them is they do have because they're in Hawaii too for traveling is just big, but no back-to-back weeks on the road too is big for them as well too. So getting guys proper rest and like that. And they're over-under set at 4.5 right now. The over is -162. I don't hate that because you also end the year with New Mexico at home. So if you're sitting at 4 or maybe even 5 at that spot, you think you're going to be able to get that game at the end of the year.
4.5. This might be one of my favorite over-unders. I mean, you gotta win these games. Delaware State, Northern Iowa at Sam Houston and New Mexico. I mean, you're basically playing 4 FCS schools.
Honestly, one of the biggest crimes in college football was Hawaii stopping playing at Aloha Stadium. Obviously, that stadium is no longer in existence and of use, but that was so much better. That new stadium that they built, it's not even a home field advantage, man. There's like, it looks like a high school stadium. There are high school stadiums in Texas 10 times the size of it. So I hope Hawaii somehow fights their way back into the national spotlight. But that's a place I got to visit last year, and it's beautiful. I don't know how you couldn't recruit there. I think they have an account out there for their director of football recruiting. What a job. What a job. Can you imagine bringing in kids and being like, yeah, man, do you want this? And it's hard to say no to that.
It's probably not a stable job with the history that Hawaii's had recently. I mean, a lot of turnover. I'm sure your job doesn't feel that secure.
They're trying to reignite the Colt Brennan RIP spike so hard. They've just been rotating through coaches like Nebraska. So shout out to Hawaii. I hope they have a good year, but thank you for that preview. And that wraps up all of the individual team previews for the Mountain West. Let's go into the grand scheme of things now, and let's talk conference title game. Let's lead it off with Jake. Jake, who do you have in the conference title, and who do you have winning it in 2024?
This is probably going to be a theme for all of my conference picks going forward for the rest of the year, but give me guys who A, are really talented, and B, have just seasoned veterans at quarterback. So I'm going to go for Fresno State and Boise State. I think that this is just with Mikey Keene, he's probably a first team all Mountain West guy. If Malachi Nelson has the year he's supposed to, maybe he gives him a run for his money. But yeah, man, I'm going with the most talented team in Boise State, and I'm going with the seasoned veteran and Mikey Keene and Fresno State Bulldogs. Give me Boise State. I'm a little skeptical just because this conference, like I said in the beginning of the show, it just always seems to shoot each other in the foot, and they can't push each other forward. They're always beating each other, and this is the year that I think UNLV is really good. I think Fresno State's really good. I think Boise's good. There's some other teams, Like, these are teams that could give them a run for that G5 spot, but they can't all just beat each other. I got to see it. Hopefully Boise State can do it this year. Broncos are my favorite.
Okay, I'll take that answer. It's off the chalk pick because it is an expected UNLV and Boise State title game. Reese, down to you. Who do you got in this one?
I like Sherwood's idea. I'm going to take Boise State to win it. I'm also going to have them going up against UNLV. I like your idea for Fresno State shape, but I think UNLV just going to be a little bit more exciting. You have, preseason first team all conference wideout Ricky White that Parks talked about before. You got guys there who I think are going to be able to have a dynamic offense and make it a little more exciting out there. It's just, what is that defense going to be able to do to help out that offense? I don't mind the Rebels thinking they can make a shot. The schedule kind of helps them out there in some spots as well, too. So I'll take them and go up against the Broncos. I just want the Broncos. We talk about that homerism. I just think it'd be a hell of a lot of fun to see the Broncos in this 12-team playoff, even though they're going to get the 5 seed, who's probably like going to be more like can be the 2 or the 3 or whatever, and maybe get house. But I want to see Boise State back to what they were when we were younger.
I love that. And I'm going to absolutely piggyback on you with that pick. I'm going to go UNLV and Boise State in the conference championship game, and I'm taking Boise State to win it. I think UNLV did enough when it came to replacing their bigger spots. Is it tough to say right now that Matthew Sulka or Haj Malik Williams can fill the shoes that Jaden Mavia filled of a program that was as lost as could be before last year? Yes, it's tough to say that, but I think they're capable of doing it, and I think this is the year they can do it with the schedule that they have. So give me that conference championship game, but I do think Boise State wins it. They're just too talented across the board. So give me the Broncos to make the run to the college football playoff, pending if they can compete and show something against Oregon. I think competing in that game is as important as, just don't get beat by 40, because then you're going to create the narrative when you get into it with a 12-0 Liberty that you shouldn't get that bid. All right. Did we get JP's pick in the doc?
No, we did not. We just have we have his champ. We don't know who he's playing though. Actually, he just updated Boise. He said
he
Boise
just
State
texted me.
UNLV.
He has New Mexico versus Nevada is what he texted me.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Wyoming.
New Mexico?
He's Wyoming versus New Mexico.
He would pick that. We could say with that. He would pick Wyoming in there just to see it happen. But if we're going off his homerism, we'd say Wyoming and Boise State. But what did he put in there?
He did update it. He said Boise State and UNLV as well, and he's got Boise State as his champ.
All right. I love it. So 3 against 1. Fresno State came from Jake. So that will be a fun one. I don't know what that text said that just popped through, but I'm not going to read it on a live here. But all right, going on to players to watch within the Mountain West. Let's throw it back to Jake. Jake, give us one, none of your 1A, 1B bull crap, and of players to watch.
You better throw it back to me for a second guy then. I'll start with one. I don't think JP highlighted him. San Diego State has a ton of good running backs, but one they just recently picked up as late of April, I think, is Marquise Cooper. And I hope I pronounced that name right. Marquise Cooper, he was the running back at Ball State. This guy rushed for over 3,000 yards in his career at Ball State. He rushed for 1,000 yards 3 straight years. This is a guy who's really productive. I think he's going to fit right into that offense with the loaded running back room at San Diego State. And that was one of the more underrated pickups to this conference. And there's another guy at San Diego State we can get to later, but just a very underrated pickup, I think, that we need to all watch out for.
All right. I like that one. Let's go down to Reese. Reese, give us your player to watch.
I already talked about him, but Braden Shager, he's the dude. Preseason, like I said, preseason second teamer. Threw for over 3,500 yards last year, 62%. Led the Mountain West in passing touchdowns and also points responsible for. And they were number 2 in total offense for the entire conference as well, too. So, like I said before, he's going to be given the keys to the kingdom. It's going to be what can they do to help him out this year and protect him and get guys open and have Timmy Chang be the guy to help him out this year.
Keys to the house, keys to the car.
Keys to the kingdom.
Keys to the kingdom.
Keys to the kingdom, dude.
That's what I've never heard keys to the house or
you never heard that? Yeah, I'd say it's keys to the
keys
kingdom.
To the car? Keys to the car. You drive the offense. You're driving the.
I've never known. I don't think
kingdom,
that's a thing.
dude.
Yeah, it's keys to the kingdom for sure.
Right.
I'm on track.
What if I shit was laughing at me?
All right, I'll give my player to watch. I'm going back to somebody that was mentioned in our first overall team talked about, and that's Torrey Holton. Torrey Holton is an absolute stud. His name should be around, maybe not even with Ricky White, but he's going to make an impact, man. He caught 8 touchdowns last year, averaged 11.8 yards per catch. A guy that I don't know if you mentioned this, Jake, you probably did, but it's a Nevada transfer. He played in Nevada 2020 to 2022. Yes, exactly. And then he goes on to Colorado State, and now he's kind of a name that stands out in this conference. And I definitely think it's a guy you need to keep tabs on this year in the Mountain West. So that is my player to watch. Any more? We'll give honorable mention shout outs just because we don't have one for JP, or do we, Reese, in that doc?
Oh, JP did say one. It says Spencer Petras.
Did he actually? Oh, man.
Yeah, it says Spencer Petras in there.
Homer. Next one. Next
Yeah.
one. I was going to say honorable mention would be the guy he's throwing to. Jalen Royals is another guy at Utah State at receiver. Had a sneaky over 1,000 yards last year. He's one of the top returning receivers in this conference. And then keys to the Ferrari.
This isn't right either.
Keys to the car.
JP, put the Mai Tai down, brother.
He did say this. It has always been keys to the kingdom. That is correct.
Okay. We just need a graphic of that with Shager and then Reese. We can put that on for.
No, it's Timmy giving him the keys.
Yeah, there you go. Timmy Chang can be giving him the keys. Here's a little fun fact for you guys. Fresno State has a former number 1 player in the country. Defensive end Corey Freeman transfers in from USC, was the number 1 player in his recruiting class. Didn't quite pan out at USC. Hopefully he does there. It's kind of like Chris Marshall over at Boise State. He was a top 5 player in his class a couple of years ago. So this is what the transfer portal's for. We hope these guys turn it around because these G5s need guys that have that kind of first round talent that these scouts did see in high school. So I thought that was really cool.